My name is Michael Leese, and today I'm going to be talking about the importance of community resilience and how socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior are resilience factors in that, as well as the mediating roles of community identity and perceived control in that relationship between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior. So a little bit of background about this study. While previous studies have examined that association between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior, there has been this lack of clarity as to the underlying mechanism between the two, or the mediating factors. This present study aimed to examine the serially mediating roles of community identity and perceived control in this relationship. Now, what is prosocial behavior? Prosocial behavior is voluntary behavior from an individual that benefits others or society, and it can improve individuals' happiness, perceptions of meaning of life, and relieve depression and anxiety. The reason this study is being done is to explore that association between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior, and the serially mediating role of community identity and perceived control in this association among Chinese adults. Now, for their hypotheses, they had 4 that were proposed. The first was that socioeconomic status is associated with prosocial behavior. Community identity mediates the association between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior is the second hypothesis. And the third one is that perceived control mediates the association between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior. And finally, community identity and perceived control play a serially mediating role between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior. For their methods, they used the convenient sampling technique, in which a total of 477 Chinese adults from Chinese communities aged from 20 to 65 years old completed the questionnaires for objective socioeconomic status. The perceived control scale, the MacArthur scale of subjective socioeconomic status, which is just a scale that depicts social status as a 10-rung ladder, and it asks individuals to rank themselves on this ladder in relation to other people, either in their local neighborhood or as a society as a whole. An 8-item community identity scale, and a prosocial tendencies measure. Bivariate correlation analysis and regression analysis were used to examine the relationships among variables. Alright, looking at some of the variables and how they were measured, we see that socioeconomic status was calculated through adding the standard scores of subjective and objective indicators. These objective indicators were measured by education level, occupation, and monthly income, whereas subjective was measured using the MacArthur scale of subjective socioeconomic status. Now, the community identity scale was used to assess the community identity, and it had 8 items on a 6-point Likert scale. And a Likert scale is just a rating scale that quantitatively assesses opinions, attitudes, behaviors. It's made up of 4 or more questions that measure a single attitude or trait when response scores are combined. And the perceived control scale was used to examine perceived control, and this had 12 items on a 7-point Likert scale. The prosocial tendencies measure was conducted to assess prosocial behavior and consisted of 26 items on a 5-point Likert scale. Alright, the results here showed that socioeconomic status was positively related to prosocial behavior and community identity. Both socioeconomic status and community identity were positively related to perceived control. Meanwhile, community identity and perceived control were both positively related to prosocial behavior. However, socioeconomic status was not directly related to prosocial behavior. Direct testing of the mediating effect showed that the indirect effect of community identity and perceived control was significant. However, the direct association between a socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior was not significant. The results of this study showed that socioeconomic status was positively associated with community identity, perceived control, and prosocial behavior. Community identity was positively associated with the perceived control and prosocial behavior. Perceived control was positively related to prosocial behavior, therefore it was suitable for mediation effects. It also found that socioeconomic status was positively associated with prosocial behavior, as well as finding that community identity and perceived control played mediating roles between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior, respectively. Finally, it found that community identity and perceived control were both strong mediators between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior. Some of the limitations of this study is that it had to use a questionnaire method to collect data, which can't make causal inferences. Secondly, the types of prosocial behavior are diverse, such as donation, altruism, and so on. The object of prosocial behavior also affects whether individuals exhibit prosocial behavior. All the relationships except for the one linking community identity and prosocial behavior were weak, and the present study only considered housing type, whereas future studies should further distinguish some of the community characteristics. Some of the implications that this has are among both practical and theoretical implications. The first is that it extends the cost-benefit analysis, social care perspective, and the group-based control restoration model in a community context. Secondly, there was a positive correlation between socioeconomic status and prosocial behavior. Finally, enhancing subjective status perceptions of lower status individuals or adopting certain strategies to enhance their community identity and perceived control could improve their prosocial behavior.